Hi and welcome back. Moving forward with our acceptance and commitment therapy series, we are going to take a look at what we can do once we know what we value, or we have figured out what is important to us. How do we actually put that into action? How do we do what matters? So how do we do the commitment part of acceptance and commitment? Think back to some of the values videos I have done that hopefully you have already seen because they are a really helpful starting point, where we describe values as a direction that we move in. It's not the end point. We use this metaphor of values being like a compass and it points in the direction we want to move in. Well, if values is the direction you move in, then committed action are the steps that you take. The steps that slowly but surely accumulate towards an engaged and meaningful life. And what we often find is that by doing things that matter and behaving in a way that is in line with our values, then we feel better about ourselves, we feel more positive, we feel more content. This is a byproduct, but a very welcome one. And just to reiterate this, there might be times when you are doing something values-based, but you are still experiencing difficult thoughts or feelings or physical sensations. There needs to be a willingness to have those experiences. Otherwise, they're just going to get in the way and you are most likely going to end up moving away from what you actually want. Remember, emotions change frequently and thoughts are coming and going all of the time. But generally speaking, the overall sense of meaning and purpose will be greater if you can make room for these experiences. It's acceptance, so willingness, and commitment. They come hand in hand. It is difficult to commit to doing something, especially something new or outside your comfort zone, if you aren't willing to experience the difficult stuff that shows up with that. By definition, getting out of your comfort zone is going to have some discomfort. I hear other ACT therapists often talking about the swamp and the mountain metaphor. So imagine you want to go and climb the top of a mountain. The view from the top is absolutely stunning, or so you've heard, and you want to experience that for yourself. You are so excited and you plan to go the next day. You wake up early, you have a hearty breakfast to fill you with some energy, and you make a start. And as you get closer to the bottom of the mountain, you start to encounter some mud. And that mud soon starts to turn into a bit of a swamp. And as you wade through, it slows you down. You start getting mud stuck to your boots, stuck to your trousers. It's everywhere. It's becoming a real chore to continue. So you have a choice. Carry on through the swamp until you get to the mountain and get to the top and experience that beautiful view. Or you can give up and go home. The problem with going home is you miss the experience of going up the mountain. And apart from you being really honest, no one else really cares if you turn around and go home. The world does not care if you carry on up that mountain or not. So this is the dilemma of what happens when we step outside the comfort zone, when we try something new. Difficult things are going to show up, and when they do, you have a choice in how to respond. If you choose to avoid them, then perhaps that gets in the way of a more meaningful life. And I'm just going to caveat this. I am not for 1 second saying this is easy, and willingness is easy, and experiencing this stuff is easy, and choosing to move forward is easy. It's really, really not. If it was easy, you would be doing it. You would have done it by now. You probably wouldn't be watching this video. There'd be no need. We have evolved to move away, to avoid, to get rid of anything that causes us discomfort, pain or distress. It's a survival mechanism. So change is challenging, especially if you have spent months, years, or your whole life doing things to avoid emotional pain. We can't make big sudden changes overnight. We have to start small. And there's a thing to notice here, something that is very common. When you set yourself a very small step to take, Do you know what your mind is likely to say? That is pointless. That is such a small step. What's the point? You're never going to get anywhere like this. This is where those previous skills come in. Get some distance. Thank your mind. After all, it's just trying to look out for you. And if you don't start the journey, then you can't let yourself down. If you don't try, you can't fail. But then you'll have the voice saying, "You're such a loser for not starting. You're worthless." You know the kind of thoughts I'm talking about. So one really common way to structure this is through SMART goals. And I'm sure most people watching this are familiar with SMART goals. So the first thing to do is pick a value. If you want to connect it with a life domain, like what you can see in my bullseye video, then feel free to do that. That's a good way to structure it. That way you can make sure you're getting some balance in each of those domains. If you haven't watched that video yet, then don't worry. We're going to go through some of the steps here. Once you've picked a value, then we can set SMART goals for that. There's a few different versions of what each letter means in SMART. I don't want to confuse things by listing all the different ways, so I have chosen the following. S is be specific in the action you are going to take. So if you're choosing a value of, say, being caring, we can make that more specific by saying, when my partner gets home later, I will ask them how their day has been, give them a hug, and make them a nice cup of tea. Obviously, that will change depending on what you want to do, but you get the idea. Be specific in the behaviour you are going to do. Instead of saying, I want to be a better friend, what does that look like? How about I will meet my friend at the cafe at 2 p.m. to catch up? Moving on, the M in this case is measurable, so meaning it's observable in some way. I will meet my friend at the cafe at 2 p.m. is obviously measurable. You either meet them or you don't. Greeting your partner with a hug and asking them how their day has been. Again, it's measurable. It's something that you can see happen. You either do it or you don't. And then the A is achievable. And think about small steps here. There's no point trying to do a behaviour that you just can't possibly do. I'm writing a thesis for my PhD currently. That's 100,000 words. I can't set myself a goal to achieve that in a week. It's just not going to happen. And if I try to do that, if I try to get it done in a week, I am likely to feel very stressed, very overwhelmed, and most likely I'm just going to give up completely. Whereas if I set myself the goal of writing 500 words, then that is far more achievable. Then when I write 500 words, that motivates me to continue. The R is relevant in this case. Does the goal actually represent the value? This is a good time to double check. If the goal doesn't really align with the value, then that could mean that it ends up being forgotten or motivation is lost. So just double check that. T is time frame. When are you aiming to do this by? This keeps you accountable and focused. Try and be specific with a date and a time if possible. That avoids that trap of, next month, I'm going to start exercising. Instead, we could have, tomorrow morning at 8 a.m, I'm going to go for a 30-minute walk. And when you get up in the morning, and all of those thoughts, all of those reasons, all of those excuses why you shouldn't go, then we can try and use the previous ACT skills to, again, try to get some distance from them, not let them get in the way. They're going to be there, and then do the thing that we want to do. Some of this might seem overwhelming right now. I quite often find that goals can seem initially too big, and there is some difficulty in breaking it down. Something that might be helpful is to think of long-term, medium-term, and short-term goals. So start with a big goal. I want to finish my PhD within the next year. That gives an idea of what I want to do, but it doesn't really give me any action at this time. So let's break that down. What can I do in the next 3 months? Well, I can probably have drafted the chapters of my thesis. And notice here that currently I'm still not really committing to any actual action, not to the 3-month or the 12-month goals. Let's break it down further into 1 month. What am I able to achieve in 1 month? Okay, maybe drafting 1 chapter. Still little commitment here of what I'm actually doing or what I'm actually going to do. Let's break it down for the next week. So this is getting a bit closer. In the next week, I can come up with a structure of what that chapter might look like. So maybe list some bullet points of what I want to cover. Still not much commitment, though, of actual action, although we're getting closer to something I can actually produce and achieve. Let's go one stage further. What can I do in the next 24 hours? So by this time tomorrow. This is where the real action is. So by the end of today, I will have written a 500-word introduction to what will be covered in that chapter. That's very specific. It's measurable, because I either write the 500 words or I don't. It's achievable. It's relevant to my value of improving myself, my value of learning more, of education. And I've set a time limit for the next 24 hours. And by me doing that, by me writing that introduction, it starts to build momentum of action. And that's what we want. And to some, it might be 500 words isn't even making a dent in the 100,000 grand total that's required. And you're right, it's not. But it's not on its own. But what can those 500 words turn into over time? Okay, I'm conscious of how long this video could be turning out right now. So I think we will leave it there. I think that's given you some ideas. Coming up, there'll be more videos about this, such as overcoming common barriers. I'll have techniques that can help you get started or maintain momentum. So if you're interested in them, please consider subscribing. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch this. I hope it was helpful. Take care, everyone. Goodbye.